have our friend Alex Alves, our guest speaker tonight, speaking about Easter, a Spiritist view. As we start tonight, we would like to take back to what Kirsten was saying, right, in terms of faith. And we learn with faith in Spiritism to be rational, to ask, right, to make sure that we combine this faith with a rational way of life. And many times we ask ourselves as we study, as we grow in our lives, why is there a holiday such as the one that we will partake tomorrow, Easter? What is the idea of other holidays? What is the idea of customs? Why do we follow this and follow that, and we don't follow other things? Why am I this way? And this is something that we, as a society, as individuals as well, we try every single day, sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously, to do this. And that's why we have here with us tonight Alex Alves, talking about Easter and bringing the Spiritist view behind as well. Our dear friend Alex Alves was raised in a Spiritist family in Brazil, and he has been reading and studying Spiritism since the 1980s. But he only started to be active in the Spiritist activities in early 90s. In 2001, he moved to the U.S., and currently he coordinates the English program at the Plenitude Spiritist Society in Kissimmee, Florida. So that's why we're getting some warm weather right now. He's bringing the warm weather with us. Tonight, we will be having some answers, right? How does Spiritism view the events of Passion, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and most of all, the traditional celebration of Easter? Mr. Alves will discuss this topic under the light of Spiritism. So please join us. Alex, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, this is loud. Jesus Christ. We don't need it. It's more warming kind of ambience over here. Yeah, that's nice. First of all, thank you so very, very much for the privilege to be using this podium, this space today. I'm very, very humble to be here in one of the most traditional Spiritist centers in the U.S. When we are down in Florida, our movement down there, it's not as strong as we have over here. So we look up a lot on what you guys do up here. So for me, it's such a privilege to be talking at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore today. Thank you so much for the privilege, and thank you so much for the invitation. We needed to make some adjustments on this introduction that was made. For the next time, we got to cut off this thing from the 1990s because it starts to tell too much how old I'm getting. I don't like to be reminded on that. Maybe we should just start to say, well, he started on the early 2000s. It sounds much better, doesn't make me feel as old as I'm kind of feeling right now. And the other thing is the coordinator of the English studies, the Plenitude. How come someone that doesn't speak English should be coordinating something that would be in another language? So anyways, thank you so very much for the opportunity. And besides, it's not just the fact or not just the Spiritist perspective that we would like to bring today to be discussing with you guys about the Easter. It's a much more a broad approach that I would like to propose for ourselves to be going deeper on the lines of the gospel so we can take the real meaning and the real message behind the words of Christ or behind the words that were written about Christ itself. We know that it's not just enough to know the gospel, because the gospel, by the words, we know a lot about it. We can say phrases here and there by heart because we know the passages, we know the scriptures and everything. But do we really know what is the meaning behind the words? Are we going deeper and digging deeper on these meanings to catch the spirit of the letter and not just the letter itself? So what I'm going to propose over here is that we go a little bit deeper on these passages and a few phrases here and there that we're going to be bringing up. So we can have, besides the Spiritist perspective on Easter, we can also leave over here tonight with a new perspective on what Jesus was expecting from us during the Easter or the Passover celebration. But before we go into the facts that were on the gospel itself, let's talk about the Easter, the concept, the celebration, the party that we have. What is Easter? Where did it come from? Why Jesus was celebrating like that? Why he had this Last Supper with his disciples, and he was celebrating something like this? Well, it's important to understand that Easter, as we know today, it has a very different beginning than we just know about the celebrations and everything. When we talk about Easter nowadays, the very first thing that comes to our minds, it's eggs. Yeah, it wasn't me. See, somebody else is sad about the chocolates over here. It's not just me. Somebody else was also already thinking of the chocolates and everything else. But what is important about that? When we think about the Easter eggs, especially on the Brazilian traditions, we think about the sweets and everything. But the celebration of Easter is also a very sweet thing, because we are celebration, above all, life, as we're going to be seeing from now on. What is the origin of the Easter? What is the origin of the term? Easter is one of the most important and old holidays among Western cultures. The origin of this celebration goes back many centuries ago, even before Christ, even before Moses, many centuries before that. The more remote traditions that we have noticed, that we have information about the studies and the anthropologists, goes beyond 1,000 years before Moses. Historians have found information that leads to the conclusion that a passage party was celebrated among the European peoples thousands of years ago. Especially in the Mediterranean regions, some societies, including the Greeks, they were celebrating the passage from the winter to spring during the month of March, which, by the way, there is a lot to be celebrating. Let's go back 5,000 years ago. No, because Christ was 2,000 years ago. Moses was about 1,200 years before Christ. So just in there we have 3,000, 3,500 years. Let's go back 5,000 years ago. How was life on Europe, on Mediterranean, 5,000 years ago? There was nothing of the things that we have today that we know as our own comfort. People were living in caves most of the time. They were fighting for their own food. They would have to be fighting for their survival. They would have to killing animals to be taking the skins from the animals to keep themselves warm. So life was pretty tough on that time. So when we were leaving winter and going to the spring, there was a moment to celebrate. You know, you spend almost 6 months inside of a cave trying to protect yourself from the cold, and all of a sudden you start to see the very first rays of sun coming up, warming up your life, bringing the light back to you. So it's a moment to celebrate. Besides that, the springtime, it's when we start the new sowing. That's when we start to spread it out to the new seeds that we're going to be able to reap or to harvest our food before the winter time again. So this celebration that was kind of a pagan celebration, it was already institutionalized among these civilizations 5,000 years ago. We were living the winter time. We have the spring coming up. The light was coming up. The warmth was coming up. You had the new seeds season to go, and then after that you have the new harvest to prepare for the new life. So it was a kind of a celebration of the circle of the life, or the cycle of the life. Among the peoples of the antiquity, the late winter and the early spring was extremely important because it was linked to greater chance of the survivor due to the harsh weather and the harsh winter that they were going through. So the very first celebrations, and always between the months of March and April when they were leaving the winter time. That's And there's some anthropologists and there's some historians that have found proofs of these celebrations among those civilizations. That's one. That's one meaning that we have for the Easter celebration. The other one is the celebration, or what we call the Jewish celebration, or the Jewish Passover, which is different from the Christian Easter. They are celebrated pretty much on the same time, almost sometimes in the same week, but they are two totally different celebrations with the same meaning, but different celebrations. What is the Jewish Passover? The Jewish Passover, this date, it has a tremendous meaning for the Jewish community because it marks the exodus of the people of Egypt around 2050 before Christ, where they were imprisoned by the pharaohs for several years. So this night, the night of the libertation, it was also institutionalized by the book of Exodus as the Passover passage. There, when the people from the Jewish people, they were released from captivity. They were released from the slavery from the Egypt to the promised land. And Moses was the one who was conducting this passage and this crossover from the Egypt to the promised land. So what was this celebration? We know, we all know and learn about it, that we had the 7 plagues of Egypt, and the last plague was the death of the primogenites, the firstborns. Yes, thank you so very much for the firstborns. And one of the firstborns that were killed was the son of the Pharaoh. And after he found out that his son was dead by the angel of the death, so he finally decided to release and let the people, the Jewish people, to go over to the promised land. How this is important? Because as God announces the death of the firstborns, he told it to the Egyptian, for the Jewish people, to kill a lamb, get their blood, pass the blood on their doorsteps, and that would mark their house had a Jewish family. So the angel of death will skip that house. They will not get enter. They will not get in. So the firstborns from the Jewish, they would not be killed. So that's how it started the entire celebration for the Passover. And then we go to the book of Exodus. There is a passage which says, literally, the Bible says, preserve the memory of that day, celebrating it as the feast in honor of the Lord. From the generation to generation, it's a perpetual institution. So that's exactly what it says in the book of Exodus, chapter 12, by the way. And that's exactly what Jesus did during the Passover celebration. We cannot forget, Jesus wasn't Christian. He was Jewish. Born as a Jewish, lived as a Jewish, died as a Jewish. Why his body was claimed on Friday afternoon by the priests? Because Friday, before the sun was down, they all had to be at home. So when he was crucified and he was dead, they were claimed his body, so they could be all following the procedures. They all can be home before the sun was down on Friday. So we don't pay attention to these details. When we read the gospel, when we read the Old Testament or the New Testament, we go over this information, but we don't pay attention from the details, what is hidden, what's the message behind the ladder itself. So it was really, really important for Jesus to be celebrating this holiday or this passage, because it was on his tradition to be celebrating that. Then we have the Christian Easter. The Christian Easter is what they celebrate. That was institutionalized in 325 after Christ. when we had the first concile of Nicaea, when the church was institutionalized. That was the church, the Catholic Church, was created, and then the very first laws and dogmas and creeds were being created, and then to compete against the Jewish celebration, the church institutionalized or created the Christian celebration of Easter, what they will be celebrating the resurrection of Christ on Sunday. So we have three different meanings. We have the ancient celebrations, we have the Jewish celebration, and we have the Christian celebration. But all of the three of them, they are very important. And what is the most important on these? The three of them has pretty much the same meaning, which are change, renewal, rebirth. Easter, it's a life celebration. Easter is something that we can celebrate, a new life for each one of us, for all of us. And the most important above all, we don't have to wait for April 21st this year or any other date to be celebrating Easter. Easter can be celebrated any day that we decided to change, to rebirth, to renew ourselves. Our Easter can be celebrated June 22nd, January the 10th, February the 20th. It doesn't matter. It's when we decided to be a different person, a better person. When we decided to face our demons and started to try to be better persons than we were yesterday. Looking into our own difficulties, see what we can be better, what we can improve so we can be a better person and renew and rebirth as a new person. Given the cycle of life, a new opportunity to be reborn and change the way that we face life, the way that we face our situations, and go into a different directions. We can be a different person with that. We don't have to wait until Easter, because we are celebrating our lives, we are celebrating renewal, we are celebrating changes. So Easter itself has a much more deeper meaning than just this change of seasons, of the Exodus of the Egypt, or the Christ resurrection. The most profound meaning that we can find on Easter is the invitation to the renewal. Renewal lives, renewal habits, renewing concepts. Be born again. Try to improve. Leave the old things from our winter, the winter of our lives behind, and start a new spring. Start to seeds, or to propose, or to spread out new seeds for our lives so we can have a better harvest at the end of this season. So when we decided to resurrect from our old past to be a better person, to be more patient, to be more lovely, to be more understandable, to give the moral values of Christ a real space in our minds, in our hearts. That's the most profound meaning that we can find on Easter. Give those values an opportunity inside of us. Are we giving that opportunity today? What are the values, the most important values that we have in our minds? Are they related with the material life, with the life that we live on a daily basis? Or are they related with our immortal life? The life that we're going to still have after we pass it away and we leave our body behind on this earth. Because Christ itself, He proved to us that death does not exist. Not in the way that we look at death or the way that we face death nowadays. What we have, we just have a disincarnation. We just have a body that we leave behind, and our soul is still living. Are we up to this life that is expecting us after our body passes away? What kind of values are we giving importance nowadays? What are we doing with these teachings that we are getting from Christ? Are they being are these seeds being implemented or put in our hearts? Or we are just losing these seeds as we walk along by the way? That's something that we can take back home and reflect on that. But one of the most important things also that we can think about it is, Why this guy can have to have all the way from Florida just to be talking about changes? Why do I have to change? Who is this guy to be talking about that? Springing clean is not enough. I already changed a lot of my home. I just throw away a lot of things that I'm not using anymore. I don't need to change anything else. Really? Why we should change? According to one of the basic principles of the Spiritist doctrine that we can find in question 132 on the Spirit's book. What is the purpose of the incarnation of the spirits? And the answer that we got from the enlightened spirits is, God imposes incarnation for the purpose of leading spirits to perfection. For the purpose of leading spirits to perfection. However, in order to reach this perfection, they must undergo all the vicissitudes and opportunities of corporeal existence. So, the purpose of life, of our incarnation, is leading ourselves, because we are spirits, to perfection. To go and to reach perfection, we have to go under the vicissitudes of life. So every time that we are making to ourselves a decision to being better, we're fulfilling a God's law. A law of God, which is be perfect, which is try to be better, which is take the opportunity that we have on this incarnation and use that to be improving ourselves, because your destiny is the perfection. That's why God, created you guys to be perfect. So the longer that you take, or the longer that you take to go through this pathway, the longer I'm going to be waiting for you. The longer you're going to be suffering, the longer you guys are going to be making the wrong decision, the wrong choices. The sooner you decide to reach and to go into this pathway, the sooner we'll be back to myself. So we have this incarnation as a purpose to be perfect, to be improving ourselves. Are we going to be doing that in just one life? Let's face it, it's impossible quite yet. Maybe in another 200,000 incarnations, we'll be able to improve a lot from one incarnation to the other. But right now, we cannot. And how can you say that I'm not going to be perfect at the end of this incarnation? Well, it's kind of easy. It's kind of easy. Because question 625 of the Spirit's book also asks us, as we needed to be perfect, we needed to be following a role model. What is the perfect standard God has offered to humankind as a guide and model? And the answer is, look at Jesus. Jesus is the highest standard of moral perfection to which humankind on earth may aspire. God offers him as the most perfect model, and the doctrine he taught is the purest expression of God's law, because he was animated by his divine spirit and was the purest being that has ever walked the earth. So, if our life, the purpose of our life, of our incarnation, is to reach perfection, and our role model, the person that we should be following through, is Jesus, when we compare where we are and Jesus is, how far are we from him? Me personally, I'm pretty sure that I will not reach a perfection on this existence, on this life. I will need a few more. A few billion more maybe. But we're going to need a lot more lives to reach that perfection. And that's another aspect why, when we talk about the reincarnation and multiple existences in Spiritism as one of the basic concepts that we have on our philosophy, a lot of people think, well, these guys are kind of crazy, being talking about reincarnation and everything. But if you look into this perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Because God, as his justice and love on the most perfect definition that we can find, he cannot give it to not one single of his sons, a privilege that he's not giving to the others. So He cannot have created Jesus already perfected, already pure, and all of us others going to go through these vicissitudes and problems that we have in our lives. So if Jesus reached this path, this goal, and Jesus is today our role model, he earned it. He lived it. He earned the position that he has. If he earned it, he has the potential. If he has, we have. Because if we didn't have it, God wouldn't be perfect. God wouldn't be just with all of us together. Why he would be giving to someone a privilege and not to the others? If he would be doing that, he wouldn't be being perfect. He wouldn't be just. If he wouldn't be just, he wouldn't be God. So just food for thoughts for ourselves. So why we should change? Because that's the purpose of our life. We should be looking also to improve ourselves. And when we decide to improve ourselves, our role model is Jesus all the way. Well, what could be the principal attitude or the main way that we can be changing the way that we're facing life or trying to improve ourselves? One of the things that we can do that I think that is more related to our daily lives nowadays is kind of start to look for happiness inside of us instead of looking for happiness on the things outside of us. Because things inside of us I can control. The things outside of us I cannot control. So instead of looking for happiness on things and people, when I have these, I'll be happy. When my team wins, I'll be happy. When I won the lottery, I'll be happy. When I married with certain people, I'll be happy. You may never win the lotto. This person that you are trying to marry, she or he may not be interested in you. You might not make enough money to buy whatever you were looking for nowadays. These are things that we do not control, and we're putting our happiness on the outside. Instead, we could be putting happiness in our own control. I will be happy when I can be better on this aspect, when I can treat better people, when I can be more patient, when I can be more trustable, when I stop to talking bad things about people, when I stop my gossip, because I cannot listen about any new. I've already start to talk to people, everything that I listen and everything. When I start to control my mouth, there's a lot of other things that we control, that we can do ourselves. That's happiness. And why is that happiness? Because that's exactly the moral values that Jesus has taught to us. If you look into the gospel, in the entire New Testament, and everything that we have over there, there is not one single passage that Jesus was talking about as his goal on any material gain. Nothing. Never. Ever. Nothing. He was spending some of his nights at the desert because he hasn't a place to stay. With all the power that he had, he could convince anyone to accommodate him, giving him a meal. He never used that. He was never looking for material compensation for anything that he did, for any of the cures that he promoted, for any of the good advices that he gave. Never. So these are the things, these are the moral values that we can control. When we started to look for happiness inside of us, that changes everything. Because progress, it's a consequence and it's a result of choices. Our progress tomorrow will be the consequences of the choices that we do today. When we leave the winter time, when we go out, then we started to sow our seeds for the next season. Whatever we're going to be harvesting at the end of the season is exactly what we are sowing today. What are we sowing today? Are we sowing love, compassion, understanding, forgiveness? Or are we sowing hate, envy, war, revenge, what kind of values are we sowing nowadays? Whatever we're going to be doing today, that's exactly what we're going to be collecting down the road. So this is the time where we have the opportunity to start a new sowing. If we start to sow the seeds of love right now, the harvest at the end of this season will be a blossom, and a wonderful blossom. More beautiful than the blossom cherry that we find in D.C. at this time of the year. Much more beautiful than that. Because we'll be the blossom of love inside ourselves. Will be exactly what Jesus spent 3 years exemplifying and teaching to us. But let's come back to the gospel. Let's come back to the passage where he comes and he decides to spend the Easter, and that's going to be found in the several passages of the gospel and everything. Gospel for the Jewish people was so important. Easter, or the Passover was so important for the Jewish people that Jesus, he ordained, or he sent people out there to prepare this last Passover, this last supper, as this last Passover that he spent with his disciples, because he knew that he had a very important message for him. When we go to the Mark chapter 14, it starts on verses 12. There's an entire description, an entire passage when he tells people, go out there, go to the city, looking for a person. This person is going to be having a vase of water. Ask where I can eat the Passover with my disciples, and they will present. There's an entire passage showing that Jesus had sent 2 of his disciples to prepare the Passover for them. But why was so important? Why Jesus made it so clear and made it so mandatory for him to spend this last Passover with his disciples? And then in Luke chapter 22, we find the answer that says, when the hour came, he took his place at table with the apostles. And then he said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. Again, we don't pay attention on the words that we read. We just read. He said to them, I have eagerly desired it. Well, someone that has eagerly desired to do something, that's because he has something important to say, to show, to give, to demand, to do whatever. He was anxious to have this last Passover with his disciples. So he said, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. And why was that? Because his most sublime lessons were about to come yet. He hadn't finished everything. The most important part of his kingdom, the way that he presented himself to us, was about to come. And then that's why we have the passage when Jesus washes his disciples' feet. The one, according to the Spiritist principles and basics, the one who got from God the raw material to build this earth, this planet. The one who commanded during more than 4 billion years the constitution and the conclusion of this planet for ourselves. The one that up to today, it's our governor, the governor of our planet. The one which is still in charge of our destinies. The one who constructed, who built this planet. He came down to earth. And most importantly, he got down on his knees to wash his disciples' feet. Imagine someone so powerful, that come down on his feet to wash these, come down on his knee to wash the feet of his employees, for example. And then we detach that and we try to make it the same analogy to Christ. For some of us, it can be even unthinkable. It's an unimaginable. Someone with such a power, such a command, doing this? Why he would be doing that? What is the mission? What is the word? Why he was showing and what to do and everything? What is the message behind of this? The message behind this of washing the feet is that renewal, rebirth, and changes are not achieved by command or decree. It's by will and action. It's doing. It's executing. On the Gospel of John, chapter 13, we find the following passage. So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I am, then the Lord and the teacher, I washed your feet. You also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example, that you also should do as I did to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is one who is sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." If you know, you gotta do. If you know, it's not supposed to be seated and waiting for something. If you know, it's not to keep the knowledge for yourself. If you know, you gotta do it. If you know these things, if you know that you have to wash one another's feet, we should be doing this on a daily basis. Another aspect, which is it's much more mind-blowing, and we look into that I just forgot to mention over here. Why he washed his feet and why there was this tradition among the Jewish and the people of Palestine on that time. There were no roads, pretty much. It was a desert. You were walking in the desert pretty much all day long. So after 2 hours, 3 hours walking in the desert, when you were getting to some place, a friend's house or everything, you would be sweat. Your feet would be with dust and all sweat and all dirty whenever you go. So every time that you were going to visit someone and you get to somebody else's house, if you were welcome, the Lord or the master of the house would send his slaves to wash your feet as a sign that you were welcome at that place, at that house. So what he did, Jesus, the master, the creator, the one who guides all of us, he put himself in a position of a slave. He got down on his knee and he washed everybody else's feet. If he did that, he's expecting that we do the same to each other. What is to wash each other's feet? Is to wash away our dust, our impurities. You sit down in front of me, let me just wash this away. Whatever you had walked through, I don't mind. I don't want to know. This dust, we're going to be washed away from you. I'm not paying attention on the ways that you had been in the past. I'm not paying attention on what you have done. Let me just wash this away. Let me clean you so we can start over and fresh again from this point on. It doesn't matter how many times we have to do that. That's our obligation on our daily lives. Each and every day, and if we have to wash every other's, each one, yes, you got that. If you have to wash each other's feet every day on a daily basis, we're going to be doing that. Because that's exactly what Jesus did, and that's exactly what he's expecting from us. If you know these things, you were blessed if you do them. Are we washing our neighbor's feet? I'm not going that far. Are we washing our spouses, family members' feet? Daily? Saying, it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter where you had walked through. Come over here. Let me just wash this. This dust will go away. Start fresh now. Because every time that we do that, we're practicing forgiveness. We're practicing understanding. We're practicing the true love. I love you no matter what you have done. I respect you no matter what you have done, what you have suffered, the reasons why you are acting like this right now. But I try to understand, and I try to see the spirit, the force, the power that is inside of you right now. Are we doing these things? Are we renewing ourselves with action as Jesus had taught to us? All of this remission, all of this rebirth, renewal process is not going to come by decree or by a command. Will come by action. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do that. So if you haven't done until yesterday, it's about time into ourselves to start to do it again. We have the opportunity. And even during the passage, when the passage goes on, we have the famous words on the Last Supper when he gives a blessing for the bread and for the wine and everything. And even on this most well-known part of the passage, which is the blessing from the bread and from the wine, these are not static symbols of contemplation. The bread and the wine, they have a deep meaning of movement and action also. Because what is the bread? Because when you go to the gospel, the passage says, then he took the bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which will be given for you. Do this in memory of me. What is this bread? Bread is food. Bread is sustenance, what makes us grow physically. Now, it's not enough just to be present at the supper. It is necessary to break the bread, to eat, to chew, to ingest, to digest the food, so it becomes a source of strength. Only then we do absorb the nutrients, and then we are able to get stronger and grow our body physically. So it's not just enough to be present at the supper. Right now, getting the information, getting the food. We have to break down this food. We have to ingest, digest, process this food, which is the information that we are getting. With this information, when we process that, we will understand the deeper meaning of our spiritual value and what Jesus expects from us. And then we know that we are going to be able to work this into actions and put this knowledge in work towards somebody else. So it's not just enough to get the message. We have to process and put this message into use. So what is the bread? The bread is the spiritual nourishment. It's the sustenance of the evolution. It's the message of Christ who nourishes us, that sustains us in the experiences of life. If we were just getting the bread, the physical bread, to eat, and we are processing it, when we get the bread from the spiritual knowledge and information, and we process that, we're going to get stronger. We're going to be understanding the meaning of these words and these teachings much more deeper than we had understood so far. And the same thing for the wine that says, and likewise the cup after they had eaten, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which will be ahead, or will be shed for you. Will be shed for you. I'm not the one who's going to be shedding. You guys will be shedding this blood or this wine. The wine, the liquid represents the movement, the action, the make, the carry out, the perform, to take a responsibility. Because after we digest the physical elements, the physical bread, the blood is the vehicle which is going to be nourishing our entire body. It's the one who's going to be taking the elements or the nutrients and moving these nutrients around our body. So the blood itself has a movement, a sign, a meaning of movement. The movement means the actions that we're doing. We are getting this spiritual nourishment. We are getting this spiritual body from Christ, which is His message. We are digesting, we are understanding, and now we're going to be starting to provoke the actions inside of us. what are the actions that we can do? Whatever goes towards forgiveness, compassion, understanding, loving, charity, which charity is the love in movement, helping other people, giving giving some time from ourselves to other people that need to talk, giving attention. All of these are actions that we're doing towards the implementation of the kingdom of God. First in ourselves, and then around the world. Because if you are still waiting that the kingdom of God is being implemented around the world so I can change, well, we'll better take this chair, sit down, and wait for a few centuries, because that's not going to happen. The changes out there will happen when we change internally. All of the changes that we're expecting, they must occur first on us and then on society. Society is not going to be changing ourselves. We will be changing society, or the way that society thinks today, or the values, or whatever we want to change. The very first change must occur inside of us. That's the most important place. That's the most important happening of our entire lives. If we change, everything around us change. Because our perspective changes. And when our perspective changes, we start to act differently. When we act differently, people around us start to pay attention. Who's that crazy guy over there that does these crazy things with no reason whatsoever? Who are these crazy spiritists that just open a place, don't charge nothing from anybody, and they are always here to talk, to study, to give them the knowledge, to share whatever they know and everything, and never charge anything from anyone? Who are those crazy guys? And besides that, they offer free food out there. They offer counseling. They offer free spiritual treatments. They offer this, they offer that. Who are these crazy guys? One day, people are going to start to pay more and more attention to that, on the way that we behave and the way that we do. And that's how the message will be spread out. But if you are waiting for the changes to come from the outside, that's not going to happen. We needed to change inside first, and then we can start to contribute for society. So, with all of this information, with all of these changes that we have, the bread and the wine, they are the meaning, they are the food, they are the knowledge that we needed to process inside of us. Once we get the message of the Christ, once we understand that what He's expecting from us is action and not contemplation, a lot of things changes. We can start to take responsibility for our own lives, for our own progress, for our own involvement, for our own evolution, for our own perfection. There is the other side, the flip side of that. Responsibility, a lot of times, it frightens us. Well, I'm responsible for my own growth from now on. And now what? What do I do? And what if I fail? And what if I make a wrong decision? If I decide to do something what is not exactly what I was supposed to do? And what if? What is the problem? If we were supposed to be doing the right thing by beginning since day one, God would have put this knowledge in us. If He hasn't put this knowledge on us, there is a purpose why we are going through this life, on this error and tryouts that we do, trial and errors. We do right, and then we do wrong, and then we do right, and then we do wrong, and then we do wrong, and then we do wrong, and then we do right. But that's how we learn, right? Once we have learned how to do the right thing, we'll never repeat the wrong way. That's how we learn to do things. Because if we are told that's the way they're supposed to be doing, what is the merit on that? What is the knowledge that we're going to be carrying with us? The knowledge comes with practice. Knowledge comes with practice. Ask to any baker how many cakes this or he or she had lost because the oven was not quite regulated. 5 degrees more or less on a baking process can make the difference between you have a great cake or a terrible cake, or no cake at all. Yeah, because it's all burned and everything. How do you learn that? Well, you pay attention. You start to pay attention. Well, maybe I put this too hot. Let me just lower the temperature over here. Well, this temperature is quite perfect. On this time, no, I forgot to adjust the oven. The oven was too cold. It didn't bake. It looks like a looks like a piece of brick. These kind of things over here. I can kill someone if I throw in somebody's head. These kind of things. But now I found out that this is the exactly temperature that I have my cake to be baked. Once you learn that, you never forget that. Once you deliver 35 babies, you know exactly how to do. That's practice. Practice brings perfection. You never know, you never forget how to do that again. That's a learning that you're going to be carrying out with you for the rest of your life. Even if you don't do this anymore, even if you don't like to do this anymore, this is something that you're going to be carrying around with you for the rest of your life. So there is no problems in having responsibility on our own choices, because that's exactly how God wants us to understand and to learn. Making our own decisions, taking the consequences out of that, learning the process, and going to do the right thing once we learn it. If we were supposed to be doing this from the beginning, right from the beginning, we would have this knowledge. If we don't, we have to go for it. And once we learn, there is nothing that can take us out of this pathway. Because the pathway of perfection is a pathway that once we start to walk through this pathway, we see so many wonderful things happening around us. We start to pay attention on details that we never paid attention before. We start to be more patient with people. We start to see that values that we were fighting before, actually they are not so valuable anymore. We have found the real meaning and the real reasons for our lives, which is to try to improve and master ourselves on the values of Christ. Do we know those values by heart? Do we know exactly what Christ has understood, has taught us? Do we know exactly what He had exemplified to us? Not quite exactly. If we knew, we would have a totally different society by now. The Easter of Jesus, or the Easter according to the Spiritism doctrine, that's what we try to bring into our celebrations. And then celebration, as I said in the beginning, can be any day of our lives. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. But the Easter of Jesus, it means actions. Means what do we have to do to ourselves to implement those values on us. The death of Christ on the cross is not for the salvation or the remission of our sins and everything. The death of Christ on the cross was for our salvation by the example, by the evolution that He's expecting from us. Because what He went through on this process. Come on. Let's make a sense over here. The one that walked over the waters. Huh? He was able to walk over the waters. The one who was able to control the storms and everything. The one who multiplied the breads and fish. The one that was curing blinds and lepers. The ones that was controlling the demons and expelling the demons out of somebody else's bodies and everything. Couldn't be He avoiding His own death? Couldn't be just easy while He was over there with the Pilatus and all of those multitudes, some kind of practice some hypnotization or controlling the minds of everybody. Hey people, you guys, you choose Barabbas because I'm getting out of here because this is getting too dangerous for me. He could easily have done that. If he could control the storms, if He could control the weather, if He could cure the people, He could easily be getting rid of that situation Himself. And what He did? He submitted Himself to God's will. He faced humiliation. He faced torture. He was betrayed and denied by his own disciples. He accepted his destiny with no complaints, not a single word out of his mouth. After his condemnation, he didn't say one more thing, nothing. He accepted everything. And above all, he forgave them all. Father, please forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. This is not contemplation. This is action. This is attitude. This is behavior. This is something that he did. He wasn't there waiting or praying for God. God, please take me out of this situation because I'm afraid or else I'm going to go. No, he accepted everything. These are the values that he exemplified it for us on his last days. That's why he was so eager to have the Passover once again by the last time with his disciples before he suffered, because his most sublime lessons were about to come yet. He made himself as a slave for his disciples, washing their feet. He lived during this process as by God's will, exactly what God had planned for him, with no complaints, accepting everything that was coming towards him. These are the examples. These are the actions that he's expecting from us. Are we ready for this Passover? Are we ready for this Easter? Are we ready for this new sowing season? Are we ready for our new life? And that's the point, and that's the time when we make our spaces, or make spaces in our hearts and our minds, so Christ himself can come from the above, get inside of us, taking control in our emotions and our minds, controlling our hearts, so the pure moral laws that he represents can finally take over us, and we can be finally an example of what he was expecting from each one of us. If we decided to let this happen inside of us, we're going to start a new life, not just today, but for each and every day of our journey on this life and the future ones that will come. Are we ready for that? If we are, let's just celebrate a new life that starts today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for this amazing reminder and teachings that we shared here tonight. And it's definitely a time for all of us to change, right? We come through this time of the year, especially here in the Northeast. We don't have the joy of the sun throughout the year that sometimes we try to escape, for those living in the South. And it's definitely a calling for all of us to change. If you wish to get up and move, it's okay as well, because we always like to remind everyone you don't have to stay seated, but we would like to go on and open for questions, comments that you may have. I'll take the microphone to you, and hopefully our friend will be able to answer. Kirsten, please.
You were not supposed to ask questions. You're going to ask Daniel.
Daniel? First of all, thank you so much, Alessandro, for being here and for reminding us about Christ. And it's always something so beautiful just to be in the presence of someone that's talking about him. It's always wonderful. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for the privilege.
I have a question. It's for myself, but also for a friend who, and I've been asked this question too, and I ask myself this question a lot as well. And maybe you can offer some insight that how do we get closer to Christ? In what ways can we feel emotionally and spiritually closer to him? I know I gave you threw you a curveball.
Yeah, it's not just a curveball. That's the million-dollar question. Anyone that knows that answer in details, you're going to be leading the humankind. I can share my perspective, and it doesn't mean that's the right one or the only one. I can share my perspective on that. On my perspective, I think that we have two ways that we can reach Christ or bring Him closer to us. First and foremost, prayer. All the time. Prayer is our connection with the higher spheres. The more that we pray, the closer these spirits will be to us. We establish a connection that's the more that we pray, the stronger our Wi-Fi signal gets in. So we don't have those lost connections and everything. But the more that we pray, the closer we get, the stronger we establish our connections with these enlightened spirits. We cannot forget this. All of these enlightened spirits, they are part of these the team that works with Jesus and his disciples also. So they were bringing us the message that Christ has reserved for us, or that He has for us on that particular moment. But a prayer is the very first one. The other one is the study. Pretty much what we just did over here. Get the passages of the gospel and not just read, but understand. Go deeper on the meaning. Try to extract the message which is behind that. Because when we do that, we can transform the gospel from the Bible to the gospel for our daily lives. Here, when we look into this, when we see Jesus washing the feet of His disciples, we can relate that to our lives. How can I do that? How I can wash the feet of my own people that are walking with me? So we have a perspective that here we are washing the feet of the ones which are walking with us the same way, our co-workers, our family members, someone which is in need. And when I wash that, I'm forgetting about all the dust that feet has been carrying around. I don't mind about that. And my perspective over here is to start fresh from now on so we can keep walking again. How do we do that? Forgiveness. So when we take this passage and we go deeper on the message and the meaning that we have, we learn the things that we can apply for our daily lives. To go deeper on this, we have the studies which were developed by the União Espírita Mineira in Belo Horizonte, in Minas Gerais, on the early 60s. There is a book called Luz Imperecível. There is no translation into English yet. But there is a study of the main passages of the gospel going to the details of that. What is the meaning for that? So we can extract the lesson that we can apply for our daily lives. What we are doing over there with the plenitude on Mondays, our study, it's not a study of Spiritism. Our study is the gospel on our daily lives. We extracted this passage and then we bring, how can we apply this tomorrow? So we can bring Jesus closer to us. We can demystify the person, the one which is the Savior and everything, the kingdom of the churches, for the one who brought in a message, but a message with a purpose and some kind of action that we can apply to it. So that's what we try to do. Prayer and going deeper on the message of the gospel so we can extract how I can apply that message, that lesson to my life on the next day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Daniel?
You are not entitled. No, not you.
No, I heard someone called Daniel, so I said, okay, that's fine. One thing in your presentation that really caught my attention was the fact of that Jesus chose this particular time in the year to bring His most important teaching, that was the sacrifice. So do you think that was based on your study, that was meant to be, could be any other time in the year? Could be, I don't know, during the summer. So did you find any hidden message on this particular time in the year, like the Passover, based on what you just presented? Because talk about renewal and what not in the middle of the year or the end of the year.
Because the Passover itself, it means a renewal, a restart. The Passover celebration reminds the Jewish people that they were freed from slavery and they had a new life to start. So when Jesus decided to bring those last teachings for his disciples, he was telling to them, I'm again freeing you guys from the slavery from the past, from the slavery from the sacerdotes, from the ones that were the heads of the church, the Jewish church on that time, to tell them, if you just act and if you just do what I'm teaching you guys right now, you were free from the slavery that you had been conducted so far. So there is another message behind of that, because a lot of people says that Jesus was a revolutionary. He wasn't. He wasn't. He was just teaching us how we can take control ourselves in our lives, and we can be better by ourselves without listening to other people as well, without listening or following a guidance from some structure, from some church or something like that. So he was freeing us again by the message of the truth. You know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Thank you. Paula, please.
Thank you. It was such a heartwarming talk. You're a real person.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm having a very blessed Easter this year because Thursday night I was in the Carmelite monastery with the Catholics. Last night I was at a Passover Seder with a good Jewish friend, and tonight I'm here, and tomorrow I go back to the Catholic Mass. So what's interesting to me, and I'm getting it this year with your help too, is this close overlap of the Passover and the Last Supper. Now, my Jewish friends believe in reincarnation. I can't say that of all my Christian friends or my Catholic friends. So when you mentioned the Council of
Nicaea 325 DC.
Right. Is that the one where the presiding thinkers decided to bury reincarnation?
Exactly the same one.
Yeah. So I'm just looking for your insight here and how we can have all these Eastern religions, Buddhism, fine with reincarnation. My very deep Jewish friends, fine with reincarnation. But when I sat down with another Christian friend and I pointed to the Bible, because she was interested in my thinking, that I've learned through Spiritism relates to reincarnation, that we didn't go any further, even when I said a merciful God wouldn't give you just one chance.
Yeah.
So can you help me? I pray and bless and don't worry about it, but part of me is still curious with the Western world.
Actually, it's a quite of a complicated issue because there's a lot of people that still believes in everything that the church tells them, which is absolutely, there's nothing against that. My role over here is not to condemn and not to criticize any kind of institution or anything. We relate it to the institutions that brings the message that sounds better to ourselves and everything. The main point over here, there is 2 points. First, there is a passage in the Gospel when Jesus were talking to Ananias. No, it's Nicodemus. Thank you so very much. Then there's no way that a man can be reborn. No one will reach the kingdom of God without his reborn again. That's a clear message about the reincarnation. But let's just keep this out of the picture for now. Let's try to think rationally. And that's when some people have some difficulties to let the rational go over the religious aspect. On the rational side, there's 2 things that we can look into that. The very first one are the works of Dr. Ian Stevenson over here at the University of Virginia. His works on the reincarnation are scientific-based facted studies done on the early 60s. He passed away 7, 8 years ago. The Department of these Neurological Studies in the University of Virginia is still open, is still producing material for that. So this research is still on. That's one thing. The other thing, let's think about the near-death experiences. All over the world, we have millions of people going on these experiences on an yearly basis. Not just the ones that are going to happen this year, but the ones that happened in the past. When you look into that, it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, a boy or a girl, a young or an old person, if it's Eastern or Western, if it's a Jewish, Catholic, Buddhist, doesn't matter what kind of a religion, if you are black, if you are yellow, if you're white, if you're Hispanic, if you are whatever ethnicity you have, it doesn't matter if you are rich, if you are poor, all of us, all of the people that suffer or go through these experiences, they have exactly the same description. Millions of people on a yearly basis. Are we all nuts saying the same thing? I don't think so. So when we are saying that we feel the light, we feel the love, we feel that we were detaching from the body and we were seeing ourselves from the above, that we could relate it to people that passed away ahead of us, our parents, our relatives, people that we loved, that came to embrace us and to give us a word of advice and everything, that we could feel that we were being pulled back to our body. Somebody told you, you got to go back because you still have a mission. Everybody is saying that, and most important of all of them who had gone through the experiences changed their perspective in life. So we have millions of people feeling and having the same experiences. If all of them are seeing themselves as surviving to death, that means that the soul still survives after that. If the soul survives, chances are that we'll be back to be completing the mission that we hadn't finished. That's one aspect. The third aspect that just came into my mind, Dr. Brian Weiss, University of Miami, he's not a nobody. He's a someone. He's a someone with a tremendous work for research and everything on the past life regressions, therapies and everything. The cases that he solved, the solutions that he gave, the help that he gave for I don't know how many patients when he does the past life therapy regressions. That's another proof that reincarnation really exists. But you got to go through facts. You got to go through the science to try to make people see the other side of it. Hope that I can help.
Thank you, Alex. Yasko.
Thank you so much for your talk. I love the part of the feet wash. So with the analogy for our time, so now our feet doesn't need to be washed, I think first of all, it's easier for me to wash somebody else's feet. Say, let the other person start fresh. But to let myself start fresh, wash my feet, it seems a little bit more difficult. And I need to do this before I can do for others. The other thing that I feel is difficult is also to let someone else wash my feet. I would say it's easier to give some help to others, but to be helped, our pride, many things that goes, it's difficult. So more than that, in order to reach to this place, as you said, we are here, incarnated, and was imposed in order for our evolution. And for that, we have to pass through vicissitudes, struggles. So I'm thinking, when you say trying error without pain, so much not so, it's okay. But there are some errors that gives us a lot of pain. It seems endless. There is no correction for that because of our guilt. So how can we foresee a little bit before we fall? What kind of protocol we can find? I know you said prayer, but it seems to me a little too late. You know, we already fell. Can we do some daily protocol?
Yes.
Something.
We can. It's called humbleness. That we are humble enough to recognize that we are not ready for certain situations. That we are humble enough to recognize that we are not perfect and we might make errors here and there. And to recognize that we may sometime need help from other people to try to help us out to get back on our feet as well. Especially, I would say, I'm 53. I lived half of my life in Brazil, half of my life over here in the US. And I still don't speak English. Can you see that? It's unbelievable. So I have both perspectives. Over here, our lives are so much more complicated. We are in a much more faster pace. It's much more difficult for us even to find time to talk to people and everything. Society over here covers us or asks us or demands us to be much more perfect, much more the number one and everything. And sometimes we get used to this lifestyle and we don't pay attention to the true values that we need to develop in ourselves. So practicing and let the humbleness coming out of us, it's not easy, and I totally agree with you. But that's possible to be made when we decided to go deeper on these messages. And every time that we see one of the Christ's teachings, it's unbelievable how much he was humble in everything. He pretty much was the owner of the planet when he came over here. Come on, guys, I built this. Are you doing this to me, really? And he accepted everything. That's the most profound example of a humbleness that we can find. If he was able to do it, we'll be able to do it. Maybe we can give him more, we have to give some more time to develop that. And my recommendation is to find a way that we can be more humble. There is a way that we can do that, and I'm going to explain to you how just in a second. And I suggest that we do this sooner rather than later, because if we don't, life will bring the humbleness lesson that we need. I rather have the lessons that I choose for myself than the lessons that life chooses that I need. Usually the lessons that life brings me are not the easiest ones. I prefer the ones that I pick for myself. How can we be more humble? How we can bring this feeling and this conception to our daily lives? Practicing charity. Visiting the ones which are in much more need than we are. Because when we are get in touch and when we get in contact with somebody else's pain and suffering, we're going to see that what we have, it's nothing comparing to the others. We're going to start to learn that what we have gives us no right to any kind of complaints. Because we're going to see people that don't even has the bare minimum for themselves to live and to survive. They are still helping other people. They are still struggling and everything. And when we look into ourselves, we have a lot of resources, and we're going to be starting to complain about things. So when we started to do the practice of charity, going after the people which are in need, caravan of love, visiting hospitals, giving food, being in the Spiritist Center to be talking to people for the fraternal counseling and everything, any kind of charity that we can do that put us in contact with somebody else's pain and suffering will bring humbleness to our life in a faster way. That's another perspective that we have. But I totally agree with you. If it was easy, most likely we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be suffering.
Thank you.
Hope that I had helped with the answer.
I would like to ask a question. Can I ask a question? Oh.
Jesus Christ, you guys want to kill me today.
It's and not because it's me, but because of time, I'll make this last question that we would like to get some help. Would like to take back to the moment that you mentioned that Jesus took the moment of Passover, right? Gathering people, and I have this is Leo theory about the whole thing as well, but I think also Jesus contemplated the importance of that moment for the Jewish culture, right? Which was important. And whenever we have to say something, whenever we have to teach something, and we use the environment because it's so important, that sticks to us, the feelings and everything. And picking up on that and some of the questions that we have, as Paula mentioned, as we deal with one another, we're going to go back to our lives. After this, tomorrow we're going to have our festivities. We're going to connect with others. With these teachings, with the enlightenment of Spiritism, what would you say would be the proper way to gather with people that perhaps they don't share the same ideals? Perhaps they have a different ideal completely of Easter is. Not only Easter, as you mentioned, that we can do this analysis of ourselves, this change, but any other holiday that we may have, whether religious or not. What is, what should be, or what ought to be, not imposing anything, because I think that's another point that you brought, that it shouldn't be imposing, right? Way of gather with others and share a moment that we're going to have tomorrow.
How about if we just wash the other's feet? How about if we just get down on our knees and say, well, doesn't matter what is your belief or whatever you think of me or your religion or my religion, but I just want to make sure that you understand that I'm your friend and I like and I respect you by the way that you are, and the differences that we have, it's not the ones that are going to make us different. The differences that we have are the ones that we're going to be studying to try to understand each other better. The differences that we have cannot keep us apart. What makes us stronger and unites are the things that we share as a common, as the love, as the respect, as the friendship, the care for the families, the care for the ones which are in need. If we're strong, if we dedicate ourselves to be focusing on what unites us, what brings us apart is going to be forgiven, is going to be forgetting. It's not going to be play a role in everything. So my recommendation, my suggestion is, let's just get down on our knees, wash somebody else's feet, stand up, give a hug, and keep walking. That's what I would recommend.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
On this note, we would like to keep this in mind, right? And we'll ask Kirsten to, in lieu of our passes, to conduct us through a visualization, to really allow ourselves, as Alex said, to ingest, to take this message. So as we cross the doors, we start to digest it and to put into practice as well.